Welcome to Magical Bedtime Tales. Tonight, we will take you on a gentle journey into the dreamy world of Sleeping Beauty. Close your eyes, breathe softly, and let the story carry you into a land of kings, queens, fairies, and ancient magic. Long ago, in a faraway kingdom filled with golden fields and shining rivers, there lived a kind king and a gentle queen. For many years they longed for a child. Every day they prayed, and every night they wished upon the stars that a little one might bless their lives. At last, their prayers were answered. A baby girl was born, more beautiful than the morning light, and more precious than any jewel in the king's treasure room. Her hair was soft as silk, her cheeks were rosy like petals of a fresh rose, and her eyes twinkled like the clearest sky. The king and queen were overjoyed. They decided to hold a grand celebration for her birth. The palace bells rang, the gardens bloomed brighter than ever, and the people of the land dressed in their finest clothes to honor the little princess. On the day of the celebration, the grand hall was filled with music and laughter. Silver goblets shone on the long tables, and golden banners floated in the air. Nobles, knights, villagers, and children came with gifts. Some brought flowers, some brought jewels, and some brought soft toys stitched with love. But the most honored guests of all were the fairies of the kingdom. They were beings of light and kindness, each gifted with a magical blessing. They arrived in a swirl of sparkles, carrying wands that glowed like morning dew. The king and queen bowed deeply to them, for they knew the fairies' gifts would shape their daughter's future. The first fairy stepped forward, her wings glittering in shades of blue. She touched the baby's cradle and said, "Little princess, I bless you with beauty as radiant as the dawn." At her words, the baby's cheeks glowed softly, like a flower kissed by the sun. The second fairy, in a gown of golden light, smiled and whispered, "I bless you with kindness, so that wherever you go, hearts will love you." A warm breeze filled the hall, and everyone felt a tender peace settle around them. The third fairy came forward, her voice as soft as a lullaby. "I bless you with a voice as sweet as birdsong, so that your words and laughter will bring joy." One by one, the fairies stepped forward, each blessing the child with gifts of grace, wisdom, charm, and courage. The hall sparkled with magic, and the people clapped with joy. But just as the last fairy was about to offer her gift, a sudden chill swept through the room. The candles flickered, the music stopped, the doors of the grand hall burst open with a loud crash. Through the doorway stepped a figure, cloaked in shadows. It was the dark fairy, who had not been invited. Her gown was black as night, and her eyes burned with anger. The guests trembled, the king's hand tightened on his crown, and the queen drew her baby close. The dark fairy's voice echoed like thunder. "So," she said, "a princess is born, and a grand feast is held. Yet you did not invite me, the one who lives beyond your golden walls." The king stepped forward with trembling words. "It was not meant to offend you. We simply thought..." But the dark fairy raised her hand, silencing him. Her gaze fell upon the cradle. She leaned closer, her voice sharp as a blade. "Very well, I too shall give her a gift." The hall grew colder. Guests held their breath. "When the princess turns 16, the fairy hissed, "she shall prick her finger on a spindle, and she shall fall into a sleep as deep as death. She will never awaken." The hall gasped in terror. The queen cried out, clutching her baby. The king's heart froze in fear. But before despair could crush them, one gentle voice rose above the silence. It was the last of the good fairies, who had not yet given her blessing. She stepped forward bravely, her wand glowing with a golden light. "Evil one, your words are strong, but they shall not be the end." She turned to the cradle, her eyes filled with love. "Sweet princess, though you must fall into that deep sleep, it shall not be death. For one day, true love's kiss shall awaken you." The hall sighed in relief, though sorrow still lingered. The curse was softened, yet not broken. The dark fairy gave a bitter laugh. "You may try to undo my words, but fate is strong." With a swirl of shadows, she vanished into the night, leaving behind fear and silence. The king declared that every spindle in the kingdom must be destroyed. Fires were lit, and the spinning wheels were cast into flames. Yet deep in every heart was the shadow of the curse, a secret dread that no fire could burn away. And so the little princess grew, watched over by the love of her parents and the watchful eyes of the fairies. Her cradle, though cursed, glowed with the hope of the last blessing. The people prayed she would be safe, unaware destiny was already waiting, silent and patient, like a shadow at the edge of light. The tale of Sleeping Beauty had only just begun. The years passed gently, like soft ripples on a quiet pond. The little princess grew from a child into a young maiden, with beauty and kindness that reflected the blessings of the fairies. Her smile warmed every heart. Her voice was gentle as bird song, and wherever she walked, joy seemed to follow like sunlight chasing away shadows. Yet always, in the halls of the palace, there lingered a hush of worry. The memory of the dark fairy's curse never truly faded. The king and queen loved their daughter dearly, and to keep her safe, they placed her under the watchful care of the good fairies. The 3 fairies who had softened the curse took her into their care and led her to a hidden cottage deep within the forest. It was a secret place, far away from the castle, far from the dangers of spinning wheels and needles. There, the princess grew up, surrounded by birds, flowers, and laughter. The cottage was simple, with walls covered in ivy and windows that opened to meadows glowing with wildflowers. The fairies disguised themselves as ordinary women, so no one would suspect their magic. They baked bread, sewed clothes, and told stories by the fire at night. The princess, who knew nothing of her true curse, grew to love the life of the forest. She wandered through the trees, gathered berries, sang to the streams, and befriended the gentle creatures of the woods. The deer would follow her steps, the rabbits would sit beside her, and the birds would perch upon her shoulders, as if she were part of the forest itself. Still, the fairies often whispered among themselves. The 16th birthday of the princess was drawing nearer with each passing season. The day that fate had promised was approaching, like a storm hiding behind calm skies. One evening, as the sun set and the stars began to glow, the eldest fairy spoke in hushed tones. "We have kept her safe for so long, yet the curse is strong. No matter how far we hide her, destiny will find her." The second fairy placed her hand upon the cradle-turned bed, where the princess now slept peacefully. "We must not let fear steal her happiness. Let her live these years in joy, even if shadows wait beyond them." The third fairy, her heart heavy, whispered, And if the curse cannot be stopped, then let us hope the blessing I gave will be enough, that true love will find her in time. Unaware of these quiet fears, the princess grew more radiant with each year. She loved to sing in the forest, her melodies soft and tender. Often, she would sit by the lake and watch her reflection in the water, not out of vanity, but out of wonder at the world around her. She would whisper to the fish, giggle with the frogs, and crown herself with garlands of daisies. On some days, she dreamed of a world beyond the forest. "I wonder," she said one morning to the birds, "what lies beyond these trees? Do kingdoms truly shine with golden towers? Do princes ride with banners flying? Do people dance in ballrooms filled with music?" Her heart longed for something she could not name, like a song half remembered from a dream. The fairies listened quietly, their eyes full of love and worry. They knew she was nearing the age when the curse would come searching for her, as sure as night follows day. Seasons changed. Winters frosted the cottage roof with silver, and summers filled the meadows with blossoms. The princess grew taller, her laughter sweeter, her kindness deeper. Wherever she stepped, the world seemed brighter, as if the forest itself loved her. But the day of her 16th birthday crept closer, each sunrise carrying her toward the hour when the curse would awaken. And though the forest still sang with peace, somewhere beyond its edges, in castles and kingdoms far away, whispers of fate stirred like winds before a storm. For destiny was drawing near, and the shadow of the dark fairy's words lingered, waiting for the moment when they would rise once more. The morning of the princess's 16th birthday dawned with golden light streaming through the trees. The air was filled with the songs of birds, as if the forest itself was celebrating her. The fairies prepared a simple feast in the little cottage: fresh honey, warm bread, and berries picked at dawn. The princess, dressed in a gown of soft blue, smiled as she looked around the table. Her heart was light, for she felt the day carried a special magic. She did not know the weight that rested in her guardians' hearts, nor the fate that had followed her since birth. After the meal, the fairies sent her into the woods to gather flowers, hoping to keep her busy while they whispered about how to protect her for just one more day. She wandered along the forest paths, filling her basket with lilies and violets, singing to herself. But fate does not wait, nor does it hide forever. That very afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the princess returned to the cottage and found herself strangely restless. She felt a quiet pull, as though an unseen hand was guiding her steps. The fairies were busy preparing a cake for her birthday, and so she slipped away, drawn by a curious feeling she could not explain. Through winding paths and hidden doorways, she came upon a part of the cottage she had never seen before. A narrow stairway, spiraling upward, seemed to beckon her. With gentle steps, she climbed, her fingers brushing the cold stone walls. At the top of the stairs was a small room, dusty and forgotten. In the center stood an old spinning wheel, its spindle sharp and gleaming in the dim light. The air shimmered faintly, as if the room itself were wrapped in enchantment. The princess's eyes widened with wonder. She had never seen such a thing before. The wheel seemed alive, humming softly, as if calling her closer. Without knowing why, she reached out her hand. Her fingers touched the spindle. In an instant, a sharp sting pierced her skin. A drop of crimson blood bloomed on her fingertip, Her breath caught, and her eyes fluttered. The world around her spun in a blur of shadows and light. Then, with a sigh as soft as falling petals, she sank to the floor in a deep, enchanted sleep. At that very moment, the curse awakened. The fairies rushed into the room, but it was too late. The princess lay still, her face peaceful as if lost in a dream. Tears filled the fairy's eyes. It remembered the last gift, the promise that true love's kiss could break the spell. The curse spread beyond the room, reaching the walls of the castle and the farthest corners of the land. One by one, the people of the kingdom felt their eyes grow heavy. Servants in the kitchens, guards at their posts, the king and queen upon their thrones, all fell into the same enchanted sleep. The horses in the stables rested their heads, the birds stopped singing mid-flight, and even the flames in the fireplaces flickered and stilled. And around the castle, as if grown by unseen hands, a forest of thorny roses began to rise. Their branches twisted and curled, forming walls of brambles sharp as daggers. They grew higher and higher, until the castle was hidden from the world, wrapped in a crown of shadows and silence. Years began to pass, but time within the castle seemed frozen. The princess lay in her chamber, her face serene, her lips as soft and red as roses, her chest rising and falling with the quiet rhythm of enchanted sleep. The kingdom became a legend, spoken of only in hushed voices. Travelers told stories of a hidden palace lost behind thorns, where a princess lay sleeping, untouched by age or sorrow. Some claimed they had seen the roses with their own eyes, and others dismissed it as a fairy tale. But the truth remained. The curse had taken hold, and the princess dreamed on, waiting in her silent chamber. Yet destiny, though cruel, was never without hope. Far beyond the thorns, in lands where the story of the sleeping princess was still whispered by firesides, a young prince would soon hear of her beauty and her fate. And in his heart, a spark of courage would awaken, leading him toward the path that would one day change everything. In a distant kingdom, far beyond the forests and rivers, the story of the sleeping princess was carried from village to village like a drifting song. Some spoke of her beauty, blessed by the fairies, others of the cruel curse that bound her in slumber, and still others of the wall of thorns that no man could pass. Many knights and princes had once tried. They rode proudly to the forest of roses, but the thorns were merciless. Sharp as blades, they tore armor, shattered swords, and swallowed men whole. Some never returned, and those who did spoke of a darkness that pressed against their hearts the moment they touched the barrier. For many years, no one dared to try again. The castle of dreams lay hidden, the princess lost in time. But one day, a young prince, brave at heart and gentle in spirit, sat by the fire in his father's hall and listened to the tale. He was not like other men who sought glory for themselves. His eyes, calm and kind, seemed to look beyond the words of the story. As the old traveler spoke of the sleeping princess, the prince felt a quiet stir in his soul, as though destiny itself was calling his name. That night, as the stars glimmered above the palace roof, the prince walked alone on the balcony. He gazed toward the dark forests in the distance and whispered, "If she waits, I must go, for no heart should be lost in endless sleep." At dawn, he mounted his horse, a white steed swift as the wind, and set out with only a sword at his side and courage in his heart. He rode through valleys and streams, through villages where people warned him to turn back, through mountains where winds whispered of danger, yet nothing swayed him. At last, he came upon the forest of thorns. It rose before him like a wall of night, its roses black and crimson, its thorns gleaming like iron. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant rustle of branches. The prince dismounted and placed his hand upon the brambles. They quivered but did not cut. Instead, as though recognizing the purity of his heart, the thorns shifted and parted just enough to let him through. Step by step, he walked into the labyrinth of twisting branches. The deeper he went, the darker it grew. The air thickened, and the silence pressed upon him like a weight. Shadows moved between the branches, whispering doubts into his ears. "Turn back," they hissed. "She is lost forever. You will never reach her." But the prince pressed on, his sword in hand, his spirit unyielding. At times the thorns lashed at him, tearing his cloak, scratching his skin. Yet he lifted his blade and cut a path, steady and sure. At last, after what felt like endless struggle, he emerged into a clearing. Before him stood the castle, silent and still, its towers veiled in ivy, its windows dark as forgotten dreams. The gates, once grand, were covered in roses that glowed faintly in the dim light. The prince pushed them open and stepped into the courtyard. Everywhere he looked, people lay sleeping, guards frozen at their posts, maidens resting by the fountains, servants still holding trays of food untouched. Time had stopped within these walls. He moved quietly, his footsteps echoing in the silence, through corridors lined with faded banners, past staircases coiled with ivy. He walked until at last he found the great chamber where the princess lay. There, upon a bed draped in velvet, bathed in a soft light that seemed untouched by the passing years, was the one he had come for. Her face was serene, her lashes resting like shadows upon her cheeks, her lips as red as roses, her hair flowing in golden waves across the pillow. She seemed not asleep, but dreaming, as though she waited for someone to call her back. The prince felt his heart tremble. He stepped closer, kneeling beside her. He gazed upon her face and whispered, "Though I have never known you, I feel as though my heart has been waiting for this moment." He bent gently, his lips brushing hers in a kiss as soft as dawn breaking upon the horizon. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Then, like the first bird singing at sunrise, the spell began to break. Her eyes fluttered open, blue as the morning sky. She drew a soft breath, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Around the castle the people stirred, guards awoke, servants gasped in wonder. Bells began to ring again as though they had never been silenced. The kingdom breathed once more. The curse had ended, and as the princess looked into the prince's eyes, it seemed that the years of waiting, the walls of thorns, the silence of sleep, all of it had only been leading to this moment. The princess rose slowly from her bed, her gown shimmering in the soft light, as though it too had awakened from the long years of sleep. She placed her hand gently in the prince's, her fingers warm and alive. For a moment, they simply looked at one another, as if the world beyond that chamber did not exist. Then, beyond the walls, voices began to rise. The people of the castle, who had slumbered for 100 years, opened their eyes in wonder. Laughter and tears of joy echoed through the halls. Servants embraced one another. Children clung to their mothers. and knights stood tall once more, gripping their swords with pride. The king and queen, who had fallen into their own enchanted slumber, awoke upon their thrones. The queen wept as she hurried to her daughter, wrapping her arms around her as though she would never let go. The king's face shone with relief, his crown slipping slightly as he bowed his head in gratitude. "Father, Mother," the princess whispered, "I have returned." The fairies, who had kept watch through the long silence of the years, fluttered into the chamber with tears sparkling like jewels in their eyes. "The curse is broken," they sang softly, their voices weaving like silver threads through the air. "The blessing of love has triumphed." The prince bowed before the king and queen. "I sought not glory, but only to answer the call of her heart," he said humbly. Yet in their eyes, he was already more than a hero. The castle, once covered in thorns, now bloomed with roses of every shade. The brambles that had guarded the walls softened, their sharp edges melting into blossoms that spread fragrance across the land. It was as if the earth itself rejoiced at the return of its princess. The people gathered in the great hall, which glowed once more with golden light. Music filled the air, harps and flutes and voices that had been silent for so long. A grand feast was laid upon the tables, and the kingdom celebrated not only the princess's awakening, but the dawn of a new era. The princess and the prince walked hand in hand through the hall, greeted with cheers and blessings. Wherever they stepped, petals seemed to fall from the ceiling, showering them in soft colors. When the music quieted, the princess turned to the prince. Her voice was steady, her eyes bright as stars. "I dreamed of a world where love could awaken what was lost, and now that dream has become life itself." The prince smiled, his hand tightening around hers. "And I dreamed of finding a heart that called to mine. Now I have found it." The fairies, watching from above, whispered to one another, "This is the true ending to the story. Not the curse, nor the sleep, but the love that broke through both." As night fell, the kingdom glowed with lanterns and candles, their lights dancing in the windows. Laughter rang out in the courtyards. Children sang in the gardens, and the bells of the castle chimed long into the evening. The princess and the prince stood upon the balcony, looking out over the kingdom that had waited so long. The stars stretched wide above them, bright and endless. The princess rested her head upon the prince's shoulder, her eyes soft with peace. "The night is no longer filled with shadows," she whispered. "It is filled with light." And so it was. The curse was gone. The kingdom lived again, and the love that awakened Sleeping Beauty carried her into a new dawn, brighter than any dream. And from that day on, the tale of the princess who slept and the prince who came was told again and again, not as a story of sorrow, but as a promise that love, patient and true, can awaken even the deepest of sleeps. As the night grows still and quiet, may the story of Sleeping Beauty remind you that even in the longest slumber, love, hope, and kindness always awaken the heart. Good night, dear dreamer. May your sleep be soft as a rose petal, and may your dreams sparkle with magic and light. And before you drift away, if this tale brought a little wonder to your heart, do one small thing: subscribe, like, and share it with others who long for a touch of magic at bedtime. Your support keeps these stories alive, carrying them to dreamers everywhere. Thank you for being part of this enchanted family. Rest well, and until we meet again in another tale, Sweet dreams.